What's today's date again? It's the 2nd.
Yeah, second.
Episode 38. Yeah?
Yeah.
Welcome to Let's Talk Possibility, episode 38 on the 2nd of July. Tonight we are talking to Lori Shyba, all about lust and revolution in the oil sands. Thanks for listening. Welcome to Let's Talk Possibility, where we talk about what's possible when we explore ideas, challenge thinking, and inspire action. I'm Talana Simpson, and with me is Christopher Dykes.
Good evening, everybody.
And all the way from Canada, after a few technical difficulties in getting going, we have Lori Shyba. Hi.
Good evening, Lori.
Hello. I hope I'm sounding okay from all the way over on this side of the pond.
Yes, other side of the world.
No, we're sounding good.
We are talking about how novels can change the world tonight. And the reason we got Lori into the studio, or is via all the technology, is because of there's so many things she's been doing. I mean, she's been a journalist, you've been a video producer, magazine publisher, a game designer, art director, advertising art director, TV talent. You've even choreographed and danced yourself. You've been a professor at universities, done things in theatre. I mean, it's just, there's so much that you've been involved in. But what we're really interested in is your latest novel, which you co-authored with Christopher Evans, and it's called 5,000 Dead Ducks.
Right. Well, thanks very much for having me on the show. When we're talking possibilities, I guess it may sound almost bizarre that I've done all those things, and I think some would suggest that I don't do any one of those things particularly well, but I try, because I go for the possibility. Now, the novel itself, 5,000 Dead Ducks, was in a way spawned from the PhD work that I did at the University of Calgary. And honestly, our province of Alberta in Canada is rich. And so my big question is, we're rich, now what? I really have three, I guess, artistic artifacts about the Alberta oil sands. And as we all know, art helps us tune our world in around us, right? And so the first piece that I did was a pinball game, a video game, a pinball game called all of a sudden I forget the name of my own pinball game.
I think I've got it here somewhere.
Pipeline Pinball Energy Thrill Ride game. And so it was a metaphor for the oil industry, as is this book, 5,000 Dead Ducks.
Yeah, so what's the premise of the story, just in a nutshell? Because I know the tagline is all about lust and revolution in the oil sands.
Well, yes. The revolution part is about a Nazi takeover of the Alberta government, because the pipelines wouldn't go through. And this, of course, is playing out in actual, real history right now with the Keystone pipeline that's proposed to go through the United States and up through northern Canada. There's another pipeline called the Gateway Pipeline. Why are we making those pipelines? Because Talana and all, we can't use all the oil ourselves. So we want to sell it. We want to send it out into the market. So the problem being, of course, that we have environmentalists in the United States and other places, even in our own country, going, you know what? It's even worse than putting oil in the pipelines. This bitumen it's unrefined. We're proposing to send the bitumen through the pipelines. Well, we've got oil company executives in Alberta going, yeah, well, what's the problem? We'll just safeguard it. We'll send it off. The environmentalists and others going, well, you can't really do that because you're going to disrupt our aquifer, for example. And so the unscrupulous lawyers who are the stars of this show find a way to take Alberta, which we call Alberia, out of Canadian Confederation and take over the government, as a result taking over the oil sands.
Mm.
And so it's a fantasy, but there are certain of these plot points that are already playing out.
Just a quick question regarding exporting into the States. I was reading earlier that Europe is considering banning the use of oil of these oil sands because of the highly polluting nature. Is the States taking a similar stance, or are they completely ignoring the issue, or trying to sort of make it out to be not as bad as the environmentalists are making it out as?
Gosh, it's a hot topic, you guys. It is such a hot topic.
It is.
You know? Because really, you know, Europe is playing holier than thou about the oil sands. And the United States is going, well, you can't ship us the oil sands because it's going to leak into our aquifer, and it's dirty oil, and it's putting a lot of pollution into the air. All right, so let me ask you this. Are you going to give up driving your cars, Europe? Are you going to give up your materialistic lifestyle, United States? Because, well, the oil is going to go somewhere. If it goes to China, they'll refine it, and they'll sell it back to Europe. They'll sell it back to the United States. Suddenly, it's not dirty oil anymore, right?
Right.
So I guess my point, this is all talking points. And if you don't mind if I cut to the chase,
Go for it.
it's about examining the good life, okay? Examining the good life. How many toys do we really need to be burning oil, to be using petroleum products? Can we simplify our lives? Can we become better consumers? Can we find that balance between still using the oil, because we're going to need it, and developing alternative fuels at the same time?
Talking about alternative fuels, Talana, we were emailed a post by Sir Steve saying that there's a possibility that there's going to be an oversupply of oil in the future, which is possibly going to then negate the need for some kind of alternative energy source, which then just compounds the greenhouse effect later on in life. Would you say that it's a fair statement to make, given this wealth of this reserve that you have?
My goodness, yeah. There is talk of that oil glut. And if indeed there are really satisfactory kind of extraction in both the oil sands and also in the oil shales in Wyoming, Colorado, in that area, there may indeed be an oil glut,
Is that
which
when you
is, you know,
when you
it's
talk
not
about the
something
oil,
that I
is
care
that
to think
the
about too
fracking
much.
that people are talking about when you talked about the shale? Is that fracking?
Well, yeah, that's natural gas mostly.
Okay.
Fracking is also a technique that's used with oil extraction, but it's the natural gas that's being found in vast areas of the United States that are also causing environmental concerns because of exactly that, the fracking.
There's an area in South Africa called the Karoo, which is almost a sort of semi-desert area, where the same question is being asked, and the environmental consequences is certainly uncertain.
Yes.
Well, I think that the main concern is the natural gas leaking into the aquifer, and we've already got water problems in our world, as you know.
Absolutely.
And especially in the United States, possibly in areas of Africa, South Africa, that are getting warmer because of possibly the CO2 emissions of, you know, the oil industry. But there are a lot of ironies tumbling around. And the last thing we want is our precious water supplies to be polluted with natural gas due to fracking. So there's certainly a great deal of research and gatekeeping that needs to be done around the natural gas extraction industry.
Okay. So what has been the response to your books and to your games and your theater productions?
Do you know, in actual fact, when I did the theater production and the pinball game about 2007, which, you know, already puts us into 6 years ago or so, 6 years ago, there was a lot of, it was being ignored a lot by the mainstream media.
Okay, when you say it,
and
it being the oil sands.
thanks a lot for listening to me. That's still happening.
Okay.
There's the sort of intelligent social commentary that 5,000 Dead Ducks and, you know, the theater piece and the pipeline pinball, the art that is being produced, is easy to ignore by the mainstream media. And sometimes I think, well, maybe it wasn't a very good theater piece. Maybe it wasn't a very good book or video game. But I get people like you popping up. I get people like Alberta Views, for example, did a review of it.
Yeah.
And that isn't that always the way, though, with this sort of subversive message. Even the intelligence subversion.
Yeah.
Even using that S word is a little bit scary. I try to provide a balance.
Okay.
I really do. Because I like my fast cars. And I like high speeds. And now I love the Tesla. Because the alternatives are coming along, the electric car, I mean, my goodness. There are ways, I believe, to keep up the good life with certain, you know, rational modifications and not kill our Earth, let's put it that way.
So just, I mean, it's something that, you know, if you go into some of the websites talking about the oil sands, and it all looks wonderful and beautiful, and there's pictures of bears, and there's pictures of dandelions blowing in the wind, and areas being resuscitated. What is the reality out there?
Well, one of the realities is that there are two camps. There's the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers has a very good website, and as you say, it's going to show the buffalo grazing. It's going to show the boreal forests being replanted, and then on the other end of things, there are the Pembina Institute site, which is a gatekeeper and shows some of the more dangerous aspects. I think as a consumer, we are obligated to take a look at both perspectives.
Absolutely.
And they used to be about that far apart. And as far as the actual facts, they're coming a little closer now.
Okay.
Okay. One of the interesting facts, I happen to have the CAPP website up in front of me right now, is that there's 169 billion barrels of recoverable oil in the oil sands.
Yeah.
Wow.
Canada's the third largest oil reserve in the world. I believe it probably goes Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Canada.
Okay.
And of our 174 billion barrels of oil, 169 billion of that is the oil sands.
Wow. Okay.
There's a lot that comes just from the oil sands. And yet there were also some other, on the wiki, gives you some more stats about the actual process then of extracting the oil from the sand.
Yes.
Requires a lot of energy for the steam injection and the refining and all of that. And that can create 2 to 4 times the amount of greenhouse gases per barrel than normal conventional oil. So there's a lot, that oil's a lot more costly to us, even though there's so much there.
Well, Talana, I appreciate that you've done that research because you've really hit the nail on the head. where Saudi Arabia, for example, extracting the oil from the conventional reserves, spends about 50 cents per barrel extracting the oil.
Okay.
Now, the oil sands, with the various techniques that are used, which are either in situ or mining, I think on average it's about maybe $30
Sure.
per barrel
Wow.
to extract the oil. And there was a time, not too many years ago, when it wasn't really very commercially viable to extract that oil. That's when oil prices were, say, $20, $30 a barrel. What are we at today? Like probably, I didn't check today, but I think it's probably around $90 US a barrel.
Yeah, it's quite a significant
and
drop
so
recently.
that's a pretty big profit.
Yeah.
That
But
is,
at a cost, of course, to the environment because of the, as you say, Talana, because of the intense amount of energy it takes to extract the oil.
it takes,
Whereas
and
how's
then
that energy? Yeah.
and then just maybe then just to make sense of the title of your book, 5,000 Dead Ducks, is there's a part of that process is there's a whole lot of those ponds. That
Yes.
where a lot of the leftover stuff after they've extracted the oil gets, as far as I understand,
tailings dams, if I remember correctly.
yeah, the tailing dams.
Yeah.
And then in the book,
That's right.
these ducks that are busy migrating think they'll have a quick rest on that dam down there and land in the gunk
The gunk.
and don't manage to ever get
Yeah.
up again. And so
Yeah.
that's how the link with the title of your book.
Well, that's right. And 5,000 Dead Ducks was kind of like an anthem. 500 Dead Ducks was an anthem for the environmentalists because a few years ago there were actually 500 dead ducks found on a tailings pond when the cannons weren't working.
Yeah.
Because you see all around these tailing ponds there are big cannons to keep the wildlife off. Because you're a duck, you've been flying for a long time. You come in for a landing, exactly as Talana said. Ooh, all of a sudden, I got muck all over my body. And so in chapter 1 of 5,000 Dead Ducks, the hero of the chapter, here's a picture of him. His name is J.B. Nailcoat, and he comes from the country of Montexia, if you perceive my meaning. And he says 5,000 dead ducks, that's all, he says. Because you look at the grand scheme of things, and it really isn't all that important to him. Now, the character that comes along to give him insights about how really important it is Mavis Wong, who is standing here. All we see is her back, but she's a young environmentalist who has to take a job with Petro-Fubar. Why? To pay off her student loans. Does that sound like a familiar story?
Yes,
in Alberta,
very familiar.
Where we have our high and mighty principles, and there's a lot of high and mighty principles flying around the universities. But what do those people do?
Reality
They'll go
is
to work
different.
for some kind of oil, either an oil company or a trickle-down industry where there's oil money, right? And so the part that I think, I don't want to spoil anybody's fun if they want to read the book. And if you want to read the book, I'll even send you a PDF file of the book if you're all the way in South Africa. But just as the CAPP website and the Pembina Institute website are coming a little closer together in terms of the actual facts of the matter of the oil sands, in our book, Mavis Wong, the environmentalist, and J.B. Nailcoat, the turbo-capitalist, come closer together, thereby the lust in the oil sands. They come closer together in their ethics and in their ideals as well, as you'll see as we move through the book. And that's really the idea, is for both sides to continue to talk to each other about the issue, so that the environmentalists can maybe introduce the turbo-capitalists to the pleasures of maybe living off-grid in a simple way once in a while and using some solar power and maybe selling 3 of their 6 boats just to trim down the amount of energy that they're using. So when we talk possibilities, Yeah?
Yeah,
Isn't that the name of the show?
it is.
Talking possibilities.
When we talk possibilities, I like to think that we can find a balance to reinvent our good life so that we still have pleasure in this world without burning quite so much fossil fuel.
Sure. Just
And that's
if I can just go back earlier, you mentioned somewhere around $30 per barrel to produce the oil from the oil sands. What would be the cost
to extract it.
I don't know what the right word would be, but getting the area back to what it used to be? Resuscitating. I know that there's a word, and I just can't think what it is now.
I'm also trying to think of it.
But is there a sort of a cost estimate of what that would be? So when it comes to replanting,
you mean to restore the land back to the
Yes,
forest?
restore.
Yes. And the guys, I think they were saying it would take 5 years for the boreal forest to take over the areas once it's been mined. But has there been a cost estimate per barrel to get an idea of how that compromises the overall profitability that we could expect, or that the miners could expect?
Well, maybe there's somebody listening to the show who has that cost-to-benefit ratio figured out. Personally, I don't think that is the main concern because, as you know, nature is pretty tenacious about reforesting.
Yes.
I do believe that the oil companies are being fairly responsible about reforestation and reintroducing wildlife, especially they're putting bison on that land. But the main problem is, if you're a believer in global warming, and maybe some of us are, is how much of that carbon gets extracted,
Absolutely,
gets released back out into the universe. There are sort of palpable examples of global warming, even in this beautiful area of the Canadian Rockies right now, where many of the alpine meadows that were just only wildflowers a number of years ago are growing shrubbery. The tree line is getting higher and higher, where our Rockies, of course, it was just mostly one big rock there. And now the trees are growing up a little higher.
sure.
On a really, negative side, look at the pine beetle. I don't know if you've heard about that in South Africa,
No.
but
Well, I haven't.
vast areas of our beautiful Canadian Rockies and down into Montana, for example, have been ravaged by pine beetles. What we need to control the pine beetle is we need 2 weeks every winter, more or less, of minus 40-degree temperatures.
Okay.
If we don't have that, that pine beetle doesn't die off.
Yeah.
Right? So the carbon going up into the atmosphere, creating a certain amount of global warming, it's just not good. So the oil companies, et cetera, can reforest all they want, but it doesn't nullify the amount of carbon that's being released into the atmosphere in the extraction and in the refining of the oil from the bitumen, right? So there is talk of carbon sequestering. Have you heard of that?
No.
I think it's trying to get to carbon neutral, if I understood that correctly.
Well, actually, carbon sequestering is where they take all that crap that goes out into the environment, out into the air, and grab that crap and push it back into the ground.
Right.
Into pipelines that are created especially for that purpose.
Okay.
Now, this a few years ago when I was doing my kind of radical theater pieces about the forum theater pieces I was doing about the oil sands. This was being touted by the Pembina Institute as being a fairly viable option to the extraction emissions, is to put it back into the ground. Well, just as the baby boomers spent a lot of money in the 1950s to the detriment of our grandchildren coming up now with the great big national debts. I mean, look at the national debt of the United States, for example, that the grandchildren of the baby boomers are having to pay off. Who's to say that there won't be some kind of life on Earth in another sort of 50,000 years or whatever, when this carbon that's being sequestered starts to rupture and re-enter into the Earth's atmosphere or the aquifer. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too responsible thinking about what our Earth might be like in 50,000 years. But
I think your
it's
point.
an option. I still think we're better off trying to trim our use of fossil
Yes.
fuel.
Yes,
Okay?
because we live
Do
in
you
a
hear
system.
that in China? Is anybody there listening in China?
And I think that it's a wonderful point, is that if we actually just trim, even if we, halved the use that we use currently, it would make a massive difference. So I just want to actually, just to wrap up now, if people want to get hold of you, is the best way through your Twitter account?
That could work. Sure. It's just, I think my Twitter account is just Lori Shyba, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. It's
Twitter
LOR.
account would be fine.
So the Twitter is LORISHYBA. If you want to get hold
That's right.
of Lori. And then maybe just to end off with a question for you. What would you say then are the possibilities for authors and entertainers or even artists to actually impact on world issues that need our urgent attention? Because that's what I see.
Well, I tell you what. I think maybe I'll tear a little chunk off my own experience here to say that unless you're a real, sort of risk taker, as I tend to be, if you're writing or drawing, doing paintings, making music about social issues, if you want to be a subversive, the more gentle you can be about it, the more effect that you'll likely have. You can get right out there and carry signs around, being an activist, but I'm afraid that the status quo, the normal woman on the street, will just write you off as being a wacko. Yeah. And so if you can pull a Herman Melville, or if you can pull a D.H. Lawrence, or a George Orwell or an Anthony Burgess style, real classy piece of art that suggests social comment, you're probably better off than carrying a placard around. Be gentle, be graceful, be intelligent, look at both sides of the story, and allow your bias to come through in a classy way.
And as you were saying earlier, to try and bridge that gap and bring people towards each other, as opposed to pushing people apart by being aggressive, radical, or even just downright rude.
Great. Well, let's keep talking about these possibilities. You can tweet us on LT Possibility or find us on Facebook. We'd love to know your thoughts about the whole oil sands issue and what's happening there, and about what we just said about using art to change the world.
And being gentle at the same time.
Great. So don't just think it.
Yeah.
Do it.
Do it.
Thanks, Lori.
Right. Thank